The girl's bare feet scraped against gravel, the desert cutting at her with every step. Behind her, the wagon wheels shrieked once, then rolled on, fading into a hush so complete it seemed the earth itself wanted her silence. A whip cracked sharp against the air, the last gift of her stepmother, and then nothing. Only the hiss of wind pulling the daylight down into shadow. She stood alone on the trail, the horizon wide as eternity, her small hand clenched around a wooden keepsake. The desert did not pause for her sorrow. Coyotes yipped from a far ridge, a circling vulture tilted its wing, and the dust hung heavy, refusing to settle. The sun bled red against the canyons, spreading like fire across stone, the last light clinging before night swallowed it whole. She looked once down the trail where the wagon had gone. There was no coming back. A horse's hooves broke the stillness, slow, deliberate, dragging through the dry soil. She stiffened, clutching the wooden charm to her chest, ready to run though there was nowhere to go. The figure came into view, broad shoulders bent beneath a dust-worn coat, a hat's shadowing eyes that caught the dying light. He reined in his horse, stopping not 10 feet from her. For a long breath, neither spoke. The horse pawed at the ground, snorting, impatient with its rider's stillness. The man looked down at her, his face carved with years and sun, silence weighing on every line. A limp was in the way he shifted in the saddle, a stiffness that spoke of old wounds. His gaze dropped to her clutching hand, then back to her eyes. "You lost." His voice came low, dry as the land. The girl swallowed. No words would come, only the slow shake of her head. He studied the trail behind her, as though expecting the wagon to reappear. Nothing but dust and distance. The corner of his mouth tightened. "This is no place for a child," he said. Her lip trembled, but still she made no sound. The desert air stung her throat raw. For a moment longer, he sat motionless. Then with a sharp click of his tongue, he urged the horse forward, circling once around her, the shadow of beast and rider long across the earth. When he came back before her, he reached down a gloved hand. She hesitated. The coyotes called again, closer now, their cries knifing through the dusk. She placed her hand in his. With a steady pull, he lifted her up, settling her before him on the saddle. The horse shifted under their weight, then began its slow march west, hooves knocking rhythm against stone. The girl dared to glance at him. His jaw stayed set, his eyes fixed forward on the sinking light. But she saw something there, buried beneath the hard lines, something older than grief, older than fear. The trail stretched on, long and unforgiving. Shadows bled into one another, swallowing the land, until only the stars rose, sharp and unblinking, above their path. Neither spoke. The desert itself seemed to listen. A lone coyote broke into a wail. The horse snorted, and the man shifted in the saddle, drawing his coat tighter around the girl's shoulders. She leaned into it, into the leather that smelled of dust and sweat and old storms. Behind them, the trail was already gone, erased by the wind. Ahead, only darkness. The story carries on with tension alive, atmosphere thick, the girl and the rancher bound together by silence and the endless trail. Boots thudded against the boardwalk as the rancher led the girl through the town. Saloon doors flapped once, twice, then stilled, every eye inside tilting toward them. Smoke drifted from the stovepipes overhead, thick and gray, settling into the crooked roofs like a veil. The girl clung to the man's sleeve. Her eyes caught the swinging sign of saloon, paint peeling, lantern light spilling out. Laughter had died the moment they appeared. Cane Ryder, someone muttered from the shadows. The name carried like a warning. The rancher didn't turn his head. He guided the girl toward the livery first, his limb heavy in the dust. The stable boy shrank back when Cane tossed him the reins. The horse's snort filled the silence no one else dared break. By the time Cane pushed open the door of the general store, whispers had spread. The girl heard them gather behind her back, soft but sharp. Found her on the trail, they say. Step off the path. You don't come back whole. He don't need a child, he's curse enough. Inside, the store smelled of flour and tobacco. The keeper froze, eyes flicking from the girl to Cane's weathered face. He slid a tin of beans forward without a word. Cain laid down coin, his scarred hand trembling only once before stilling again. When they stepped out, the street had drawn a circle of stairs. Women on porches, gamblers at windows, children pressed against railings. The weight of it pressed harder than sun on skin. At the far end of town, the saloon's piano struck a jarring note and then stopped. The doors swung wide. A man leaned out, broad, with a coat too fine for dust, smile too thin for kindness. His voice cut through the street like the scrape of a knife. Cain Ryder, dragging home strays now? The crowd rustled. The girl looked up, saw Cain's jaw tighten, but his eyes never leave the horizon. He didn't answer. The man laughed, low and sharp, then stepped back inside. The doors swung once more, swallowing the sound. That night, Cain took the girl to the edge of his ranch. The town's lantern glow a dull shimmer behind them. The house loomed against the stars, big, empty, its windows black as if watching. He unsaddled the horse without a word, handed her a blanket, and set beans to boil on the iron stove. By firelight, shadows crawled the walls. The girl sat cross-legged, knees drawn close, watching him. His face softened only when he bent near the flames, though the scars along his hands gleamed and flickered. "You'll sleep here," he said, laying the blanket by the hearth. She nodded, but her voice stayed caught in her throat. When the flames hissed low, she whispered only once, "Were you always just a rancher?" He stilled, eyes fixed on the fire. For a long time, the wood crackled in place of words. Finally, he leaned back, the weight of his silence answer enough. Outside, the coyotes wailed again, echoing against the canyon. The girl shivered and pulled the blanket tight. The next day, whispers rose thicker than smoke. The saloon keeper leaned across the counter, telling a drifter that Cain Ryder once drew faster than any man alive, back before the blood feud that burned through 2 counties. A woman outside the boarding house swore he'd left 10 men in the dust before vanishing to his cattle and silence. By afternoon, the girl overheard more men in the alley, voices sharp and hungry. Word is he's fat off cattle, keeps gold stashed in the ranch house. Man like Ryder, he's worth bleeding. And the child? Just another mouth to quiet. The girl's stomach nodded. She pressed her back to the wall, heart pounding, until the voices faded into the din of poker chips and clinking glass. When she returned to Cain, dusk was thickening. He sat on the porch, shotgun resting across his knees, gaze fixed where the desert swallowed the trail. His silence was iron, but the air around him was storm-tight. The girl climbed onto the step, hugging her keepsake to her chest. She didn't tell him what she'd heard. She didn't have to. His shoulders carried the knowing already. Smoke curled up from the saloon chimney, a darker shade against the night. Somewhere inside, laughter rose sharp and cruel, the kind that tasted of gunpowder before it was even drawn. Cain shifted, the boards creaking under his weight, his shadow stretching long across the ground. The town was waiting. The outlaws were watching. The night was listening. And the girl, silent beside him, felt the storm begin to move. Flames cracked against the sky, sudden and fierce, painting the horizon with burning orange. Cattle bellowed in terror, hooves pounding as they scattered across the darkened field. Gunfire split the night, echoing sharp against the canyon walls. The girl jerked awake to the roar of chaos. Smoke clawed its way through the window, acrid and stinging her eyes. She stumbled toward the door, but Cain was already there, revolver drawn, coat flaring behind him. His hand pushed her back. "Cellar. Now!" The house shuddered as a torch struck the roof, drywood snapping into fire. Shadows of men moved through the smoke outside, rifles glinting under starlight. The girl's breath caught as she saw them, cruel faces blurred by flame, voices jeering. "Bring him out," one shouted. "Burn it all if we have to." Cain shoved the cellar door open, forcing her inside. Darkness swallowed her, only slivers of firelight cutting through the cracks. She pressed her ear to the wood, trembling, clutching her keepsake until her knuckles went white. Above her, boots thundered against the porch. The scrape of spurs, the crunch of wood under heavy steps. Then Cain's voice, hard as iron. "You've come far enough." A laugh answered, deep mocking, edged with venom. "Cain Ryder." thought you were buried with the rest of your kind." The girl bit her lip. She recognized the voice from the alley in town. Kane's reply came slow, steady. "You should have stayed in the shadows." The porch boards groaned. Silence stretched, thick as rope about to snap. Then steel hissed. A pistol cocked. The gunfire that followed rattled the walls. Bullets chewed through the house, splinters flying, flames roaring higher. Kane's revolver barked back. Each shot deliberate, measured, the rhythm of a man who had once lived by it. "Surround him!" another voice shouted. Torches arced through the air, landing in hay, in dry brush in the corral. The ranch groaned as fire raced across it, the night alive with smoke and screams of cattle. Through the cracks, the girls saw him, Kane stepping into the yard, smoke wreathing him like a shroud. He didn't limp now. His stride was slow, deliberate, the way a predator moves when a kill is already decided. The gang closed around him. Their leader stepped forward, pistol spinning lazy in his hand. His grin cut wide, teeth bright in the firelight. "You always were too proud to die quiet." Kane's revolver hung loose at his side, but his eyes locked on the man's every twitch. The flames painted his face in shifting shadow, and for a moment, the girl thought she saw him younger, sharper, the ghost of a legend the town still whispered about. The leader raised his pistol. The night held its breath. Kane's hand blurred. A single shot cracked the air. The leader staggered, gun falling from his grip, blood blooming across his chest. His body dropped hard into the dirt. The gang froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved, fire snapping loud around them. Then one cursed, raised his rifle. Kane fired again. Another man dropped. The spell broke. The outlaws scattered, some firing wild as they ran, others leaping onto horses that bucked against the smoke. Bullets whipped to the yard, chipping stone, tearing cloth, but Kane stood his ground, revolver steady, every shot finding its mark. The girl pressed her hands over her ears, eyes wide as the cellar shook with thunder. But through it all, she heard Kane's voice once more, calm as the desert wind. "Run while you can." By the time the last outlaw vanished into the horizon, the fire had eaten half the ranch. The corral lay in ruins, cattle gone, the house groaning under flame. Kane lowered his revolver, smoke curling from the barrel, his chest heaving with slow, measured breaths. He turned toward the cellar, and the girl flinched back as the door creaked open. For an instant, she feared the men had returned. But it was Kane, framed by fire, his face cut in shadow, eyes burning like the horizon itself. "Come out," he said. She climbed into the smoke-filled air, choking, clutching her charm. Around them, the world was ash and ruin. The ranch still smoldered, but Kane stood unbowed, revolver in hand, watching the darkness where the gang had fled. The girl slipped her hand into his, small fingers against callous skin. He didn't pull away. Above them, the sky flickered with flame and stars. The desert whispered its silence once more, broken only by the crack of burning wood. And there, on the edge of ruin, the legend of Kane Ryder was reborn. Smoke drifted low across the yard, curling around blackened beams and the charred skeleton of the house. The girl stood barefoot in the ash, shivering though the embers still burned hot. The wind carried the stench of ruin, sharp as iron and bitter as loss. Kane Ryder stood in the wreckage, revolver still heavy in his hand. The fire painted him in flickering red, shadows stretching long across the ruined ranch. His chest rose slow, steady, every breath drawn as though it might be his last. The girl's voice broke the silence. "Are they gone?" His eyes lingered on the horizon where the outlaws had vanished. The desert gave no answer, only the whisper wind pushing smoke across the stars. At length, he lowered the revolver, thumbed open the cylinder, and let the spent shells fall into the dirt. "They're gone," he said. Her small hand found his sleeve. He looked down, saw the soot streaking her cheeks, the way she clutched her wooden charm like a shield. Something in his shoulders loosened just a fraction, as if the battle had left him hollow. Behind them, the last wall of the house groaned, then collapsed in sparks. The girl flinched, pressing closer. Kane knelt, for the first time that night, his knees sinking into ash. He set the revolver aside, out of reach, and placed both hands on her shoulders. "You're not alone anymore." Her lip trembled, but she nodded. At dawn, the smoke lifted in thin ribbons across the valley. What cattle remained wandered restless, tails swishing against flies, eyes rolling from the fire's scent. The corral lay in splinters, the barn in ruin. Only the land itself endured, red earth steady beneath the scars. Cain moved through it all in silence, hammering a post back into the soil, leading a horse to water, stamping out what sparks still smoldered. The girl followed, carrying what she could, small branches, scattered tools, a bucket too heavy for her arms. He did not stop her. By noon, the worst of the ruin had been cleared. The girl sank against a stone, hair tangled, hands black with soot. Cain stood over her, the sun cutting his features deep. He reached down, offered her the canteen. "You'll stay here," he said. Her eyes lifted, searching. "Stay with you?" He nodded once. "Not as a burden. As mine." The word lingered, heavy and unshakable. She gripped the canteen tight, as if afraid the promise might vanish if she let go. Weeks passed. Whir the fire, and the gunfight spread faster than the smoke ever had. In the saloon, men whispered the night. Cain Ryder stepped back into legend. They told of the gang broken by his hand, of a duel under burning sky, of a girl who walked out of the ashes at his side. Some claimed the child was no orphan at all, but kin of a woman Cain had once loved. Others swore she was sent by heaven itself, proof that even the most cursed gunfighter could be given a second chance. The girl heard the whispers when she ventured into town, clutching Cain's hand. She didn't speak of them. She only held tighter when the stares grew sharp. Cain heard them too. He never answered. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the canyon and painted the land in gold, Cain sat on the porch of what he was rebuilding. The girl nestled beside him, head against his arm. She turned the wooden charm in her fingers, the edges worn smooth now. "Will they come back?" she asked. His eyes scanned the horizon, where the desert stretched endless and silent. He shook his head. "Not while I stand." She studied his profile, the scars, the shadows, the steady stillness. "Then I'll stand too," she said. He looked at her then a long moment, and for the first time in years, the faintest smile cracked his face. The old storyteller's voice carries it on from there, as it always has, passed from one fire to the next. Folks say the richest cowboy gave away more than gold when he took that orphan girl from the trail. They say he gave away the last of his silence, the last of his grief, and gained something a man cannot buy with all the cattle or coin in the world. Some tell it as a tale of blood and against smoke, the night Cain Ryder stood unbroken against fire and outlaw. Others tell it softer, a tale of ash and rebirth, where a child's small hand pulled a legend back into the living. But all agree on this. The girl was not left behind on that trail. She was chosen, and Cain Ryder, once a ghost of the gun, became not just her savior, but her father. So when the coyotes wail across the desert, when the night wind shakes the boards of an old saloon, folks still whisper. They whisper the trail, the fire, and the vows spoken in the ashes. And they say a legend was born that night, not of Cain Ryder alone, but the bond between a broken man and an orphaned child who made each other whole.